Before I begin what I'm going to say, I just want to say, in case you're thinking that somebody punched me in the eye, now it's just an irritating sty that'll hopefully pass soon. Well, we're in Shabbat Bereishit, and Shabbat Bereishit is the Shabbat of beginning. And it's interesting to say beginnings when we don't have an end, because when we get to the end of Torah, you know, Simchat Torah, the joy of Torah, that celebration that isn't found in the writings of Torah, but rather is about the joy of this extraordinary doctrine that we have. We get to the end, the last word. This is about the end of Moses' life. The people are standing on Mount Nebo, Har Nevo, and they're looking down at what we know is the Dead Sea and that region of Israel. And Moses will die somewhere on that mountain, and the people will journey forward into what we know to be the Promised Land, the land of Israel. Well, before I get to Israel and Gaza and all those things, I just want to say that I'm leaving in right after Bar Mitzvah tomorrow, actually the next day, Sunday morning, going to Europe, going to Lithuania, to Vilnius, the capital, then to Poland, Warsaw, various cities, and then to Czech Republic with a group of us, with a group of VOS travelers. And I haven't done that in a while. I've been leading Israel trips for now since 2008. And hopefully we'll be doing that very soon again. In fact, let me say at this point in this little informal video that it's time to start thinking about going back to Israel, making a reunion trip there. Also, it's time to think about going to Israel, maybe for the first time for you or your family. And if you're interested, contact the synagogue, contact my office. And I'm thinking that if there is enough interest, which I imagine and understand there will be, then maybe we'll plan a trip for sometime in 2026. Well, Shabbat Bereishit is the culmination. You know, we come out of Simchat Torah and we come into Simchat Torah from Sukkot. So we had that week in booths, and at the end of it we had rain, reminding us of the vulnerability of being human. We live in that simple hut, just as we live in great towers and beautiful buildings, and know ultimately, whether it's 9/11 that taught us that, or the Woolsey fire that taught me that all that stuff that we think is so, first of all, protective, ultimately isn't. We don't rely on that protection alone. But also that all that's in there isn't nearly as valuable and important to us as people. And what we find in the sukkah are people, and hopefully some good meals. And the idea is, let's get back to basics. Any of you who are campers know that sometimes you go out and there's a fire and that great smell that's in your clothes of the wood fire burning, and the memory of not sleeping well in a tent, having an air mattress that ultimately deflates during the night. But there's something great about being with our loved ones, friends and family, and that's Sukkot to me. And before that, we had Yom Kippur, of course. And Yom Kippur was heavy and introspective and challenging, hopefully. And we were fasting, and there was a lot about that was about discomfort and sometimes the greatest growth. Perhaps I shouldn't say sometimes. Always the greatest growth in our lives comes through our own discomfort. I often say that, sitting on the uncomfortable chair is better for us than the cozy chair, especially the one that reclines, because we have to get up. Well, we're living at an extraordinary point in Jewish history that will be recorded and remembered for being an extraordinary point in world history and Jewish history. I believe, I'm an optimist, but I'm also somebody who studies the region of the Middle East and the news constantly, and in relation to contextualize by what's going on in the world. And I have the optimism born of my understanding, and my understanding leads me to believe that we may see a future in which the Middle East looks nothing like the Middle East of the past. Now you might say, well, that's just too large an undertaking for this moment, or too ambitious, but I think it might be true. If I look at all the pieces, the chess pieces that have been moving across the board in surprising ways to many of us, and sometimes we look at a chess game, we don't realize that there's a strategy, that one piece is going in one direction, we think it has no relationship to the piece over here. And I think what we're seeing here is the emergence of an end game, a plan in which Iran is isolated. We see that, and isolation hopefully breeds a kind of transformation from within that has to happen in that society. But also the weakening of Iran creates a a compatibility and a shared value and shared reality for many of the nations that include Israel and the Arab world. So there's a lot there. Look at the relationship with Jordan. Look at the relationship with Egypt. Not always comfortable, but necessary and productive and ultimately long-lasting. And I think the Arab nations see that, and they see what they can achieve and the benefit to them. And of course, Israelis see the benefit to them. U.S., of course, sees this as extraordinarily important in that region, that volatile region of the world. The difficulty we might have right now in celebrating this victory is, or not we, including myself and many of you, is that we don't want to give credit to people whom we don't like, whether that's President Trump or Prime Minister Netanyahu. But I don't care about the individual in a case like this. I care about the outcome, and ultimately I care about lasting peace. And I'll pin a medal on anybody who gives us that, regardless of what led to it. Somebody said to me, well, you know, a lot of that was achieved. A lot of that 20-point plan came from previous administrations. Yeah, it did. It actually emanated from as we understand it now, Arabs and Israelis developing that plan, not so much the administration of the U.S. The administration of the U.S., the prior one, looking at the plan and sanctioning it, but the Emiratis and the Israelis building that plan that didn't work then, but the timing was right and the right people were on board and the reality on the ground was right for it to emerge victorious and lasting now. I say lasting, and some of you might be cynical about it being lasting. This will be a brief ceasefire, you might think. It won't last because ideologies don't go away. Well, it's true that that might be the case, but again, you might expect me to be optimistic, and I'll be reliably optimistic. And the reason I am optimistic is because the circumstances have changed. Because both sides, Palestinians, Hamas, and Israelis, the society and the military and the leadership, are exhausted. Israel's never had a war that's lasted anywhere near this long. Israeli wars last days historically, not years. A 2-year war has taken it out of them. And on the other side, it doesn't mean that they couldn't fight on and endure and emerge victorious in the case of Israel. But I do think that it's time. I also think that there's the aspect of this reality, which is the hubris, the ego of President Donald Trump, which we may not enjoy or find pleasant, but in a case like this might be on the side of peace. Because he's so personally attached, his name, I, me, and Trump in every sentence might just mean that nobody will mess with it because it's his plan and it's his peace, and let him have the medals, all the medals he wants. And in fact, they should go to his administration, his team, and him. And anybody, in fact, we should be giving medals to anybody who contributed an ounce of ink to a plan that might bring peace to that region. I've heard a lot of theories, interesting theories, and reports from within Israel and within the intelligence community here that give indications of what the future could look like in Gaza. And I'm uplifted by that idea for Palestinians and for the world in relation to it. So those are my thoughts. I hope that we are going into the Shabbat Bereishit, this Shabbat of creation, and in our case, always recreation, realizing that we are recreationists, that we are people who don't only have recreation, but we ultimately always find ourselves, recreating reality, and hopefully in this case, restoring peace. May the remaining 19 hostages, those bodies, buried or lost or hidden somewhere in Gaza, emerge and be brought home to burial with dignity for their families in Israel in the days ahead, and may peace ultimately prevail. Shabbat Shalom. See you when I get back from Europe.